Hello, and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm your host, Brian. Thanks for tuning in. And today we have Dr. Brian Thomas in an interview on the anatomical differences between humans and apes. The part two of two, the first part being with Dr. Jerry Bergman. And this is part of my Are We Apes series, but it's also served as the last episode of my Are We Apes series. That specific Are We Apes was a specific series that I had devised to respond to claims made by supposed or alleged human evolution as believed by evolutionists. And we went all over the block with this, the junk DNA arguments to Y chromosome I mean, we're just all over the place with it. But it was incredible. I loved it. We talked about the fossil evidence. We talked about difference between humans and apes. I thought Dr. Jerry Bergman did a phenomenal job. I thought Dr. Brian Thomas, you're about to see, he did a phenomenal job as well. And we get into some of the deeper issues, especially interpretive issues involved and worldview issues. And so that's what I wanted to really aim for, just kind of get a deeper, more significant feel to this so that we can kind of go a little bit deeper than just the surface stuff. I mean, we dealt with the surface stuff too, but we wanted to go a little bit deeper and to really hit home where the real problem lies. So we managed to do that, and I enjoyed it. I'm glad that Dr. Brian Thomas gave us his time. He's from the Institute for Creation Research. He's actually the second person from the Institute for Creation Research that I've had on my channel. The first one will be in from Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins. So I really enjoyed Dr. Brian Thomas being on here, and he has the same first name as me, so he's got pluses all around. So I hope you guys enjoy the video and the interview that I had with Dr. Brian Thomas. I know I did, and I'm glad you guys enjoyed this particular series. Thank you.
Hello, my gentle and, of course, very modern apes.
Sure, I'd like to kiss you goodbye.
All right, but you're so ugly.
Human beings are not just related to apes, but actually aren't.
This is a primate, and so is this, and so is this, and so is this. Hey, that's me.
We are still hominids. We're still primates, mammals, tetrapod.
Well, hello, and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm your host, Brian, and I'm interviewing a Brian today, Dr. Brian Thomas. Um, uh, do you want to give a brief introduction of yourself, some details on your background and that sort of thing? And if you want to, you can throw in whatever you're presently working on.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, research scientist at the Institute for Creation Research here in Dallas. If you're in the Dallas area or North Texas or Southern Oklahoma or anywhere close, you can come to the Discovery Center that we have here. I'm looking at it right through my office window. And well, we've been in existence since 1970. We spent 36 years in the San Diego, California area, moved here to Dallas in about 2007, and that's when I joined the Institute as a science writer. So I work on, my expertise is fossil proteins. And so we just published a paper this year in analytical chemistry. I have the the cover that we made is on the wall behind me on that, and doing some really fun things, and really why we find that of interest and so many other aspects of our creation interesting is because we have time clocks that look young. For example, proteins in fossils make the fossils look much younger than is conventionally assumed. And we also have experiments going on here at the Institute with fish, cave fish, and we're trying to find out how fast these fish can change from sighted to blind. The cave variety descend from the sighted variety. And our hypothesis is that God designed them to adapt quickly. So we're seeing how fast they adapt, and the initial results are looking like they're pretty close match with what we predict based on creation rather than evolution. We don't think those changes are happening by slow and gradual mutations over eons, but by redeployment of alleles and other genetic features that God crafted into those original fish just thousands of years ago. So that's a little bit, just a little bit about what we do here at the Institute. And if you want to touch base with us, it's icr.org.
Uh, I don't suppose any of those adaptations are new genetic information.
Well, it's reshuffling and redeployment of old genetic information. In fact, secular geneticists and biologists have already done genome sequencing of the full genomes of the sighted fish and the blind varieties, and they found just a handful of tiny differences, genetic differences. So th they look radically different. They behave radically different. They have different physiology as well, and all those differences don't come from genetics. At least they don't come from genetic mutational differences. Those differences instead come from somewhere else in the cell. There's information parallel to the DNA that's shutting down certain DNA, opening up other DNA, reshuffling codes that already exist in there to make these cave varieties. So it's a wonderful time to be a Bible believing, creation believing scientist these days.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, it's a wonderful time to be any young Earth creationist at this point. Uh, Dr. Bergman said something I thought was kind of cool in our last interview. He said that he thinks as time goes on, the evolutionists is going to disprove evolution because all the studies that are coming out recently are from the evolutionary community. So it's that's absolutely amazing that the fact that we're seeing that because there was a time when all young Earth creationists can cite their own literature. Now we're citing their literature because that
And
because all the
I've
studies. Go ahead.
spoken with many of them who have run into evidence for creation in an effort to study evolution. They've run into so much evidence for creation that they become convinced of creation, and they give up evolution. And some of them they've said in this office right here and told me their story, how they decided, you know what, I was told evolution and it was fact, and I was just wanting to prove it some more, and I found this evidence for creation. And so I thought, well, what else is out there? And they found creation. They actually went and studied the Bible for the first time and read it, learned that they're a sinner, learned that there's a Savior, and came to know the Lord. And that's an everlasting
Right.
relationship that that can start anyone who repents and believes.
Absolutely. Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins works for Institute for Creation Research. I've had him on here before. He's a great guy. Every now and then I'll email him a question. All right, let's
Nice.
jump into our questions here. Uh, let's do some start out with some basic questions. Could you briefly explain why you believe humans and apes are distinct created kinds rather than sharing a common ancestor like the evolutionists believe?
Hmm. I would say there's two streams of evidence that point me in that direction. Um, and the first is right out of the Bible, where the Bible is very clear that God made animals and that God made humans separate from those animals. And then the second is from various disciplines. In other words, the real world matches what the Word said. And so one discipline would be linguistics, where we study language and find that there are no apes that approach language. In fact, there's no animal at all that approaches the ability to speak and have human language. And it's language and the ability to talk um, is, as far as we know, uniquely human. And that also matches what we learn from about God in the Bible. And what is he all about? He is all about having relationship with us and wanting us to relate with him, wanting us to relate rightly with one another. And how can you relate? How can you have relationships without sharing what's on your mind? That's where language comes in, and he uniquely equipped us and only us. Um, I guess us and angels as well could speak, but persons, right, with the ability to relate, and not so much animals. They're in a completely all the animals are in a completely different category in that regard. And then this you could look at the science that we're going to talk about a little bit, which is linguistics, anatomy, and there are anatomical distinctions between all apes and all humans that are alive today, and I believe all these distinctions, when they're visible, when we can find them in fragmented fossils, then they actually reveal the identity of these fossils. But that's a very difficult study because fossils come fragmented, they come squished, and they don't necessarily always have all the right pieces of anatomy that enable us to distinguish between ape or human. But when they do, we can distinguish between ape and human. So um, paleoanthropology would be the third discipline. If we evolved from apes, most of the fossils should show this long history of nature tinkering with bones and transforming them, because every single one of our bones is different from the corresponding bone in an ape in certain ways. And so there's most of the bones should show this long history of tinkering, and instead what the bones actually show is a long history of apes being apes and humans having been humans all the way back. So those are three scientific disciplines that match what I see in God's word and convince me that that human evolution, which is what I used to believe until a friend challenged me. He said, "Are you sure about that? What do the fossils say?" And I said, "Well, I don't need to look at the fossils because my professors told me." "Well, how do you know that they're true, that they're right?" Because they are right, because they're my professor. They have white lab coats, right? I mean, isn't that all you need to be a purveyor of truth? And so that started a long investigation. At the end of that investigation, I've come out with the conclusion that, the Bible actually got it right all along, and these different disciplines back it up.
Right. Um, and something you said. Oh yeah. When you said and you talked about the apes and humans or the fossils evidence is being where the fossils are found in very poor conditions. I actually did a video about that. Like the last video I did, it's scheduled to come out today. It'll definitely be out by the time I upload this video. Um, but that video is scheduled to come out today, and I actually talk about the poor conditions that these fossils are in, and they're highly interpreted. And on top of that, they have to be reconstructed. And guess how they reconstruct it? They interpret how they're supposed to be. And it's not like they have the jigsaw puzzle box right in front of them so they know what it looked like originally. And so they're piecing it together based on modern human and modern apes. And so it's like, okay. And on top of that, evolutionists come along and they interpret their interpretation.
Oh yeah, it's a field rife with controversy, and uh, every scientist who's in that field has their own interpretation, and many of them argue with each other. And in the process, we get to watch the fallout. Basically, they disprove each other, and so neither of them are right in a lot of cases.
All right. What are the most obvious external features that immediately distinguish humans from apes? Like you talked about just a few minutes ago that things that might be visible. I think you were talking about fossils then, but But just like with modern humans and apes, just eyeballing it, I realized there was some deeper stuff too. But just visibly, could you share some distinguishable characteristics that you can look at and say, "Yep, apes have this. They have longer arms. They, the way the shoulders are designed. All that stuff."
Yeah, so just highlighting a few features, going head to toe, I guess. We could say that well, I'm going to start with one that's not terribly visible. You have to do CT scans to see this one, but the inner ear has an orientation in apes such that the ape skull is oriented so that basically the apes walk on all fours, and so they're quadrupedal. They can walk on two legs for not very efficiently, but they're designed to efficient locomotion is on all fours. So that being the case, the inner ear is positioned and oriented within the skull so that the head, it is rightly rotated uh, when the thing is on all fours. Okay, and within humans, we're upright, so our spine comes right straight down the bottom of our skull, and our inner ear area is rotated at a different angle. So there's that difference. Speaking of angles, if this is a skull and this is a spine coming into the skull, in humans the spine comes up to the bottom, and in apes the spine is at an angle like this. Sometimes it's toward the back of the skull, and sometimes it's toward the bottom of the skull. In us, it's way down here. Anyway, so there's a big opening where the spine intersects there. It's called the foramen magnum, and it turns out that in apes, the foramen magnum angle where the spine connects is always negative, and then in humans, it's positive. So you could just turn the skull upside down, and if you have a foramen magnum there, you could see that angle. It's called the FM angle, and that's an objective measurement that you can do, and many have done. What else? And like you mentioned, the shoulders. Apes have a shoulder girdle that's uniquely configured so that they can swivel. Their arm can swivel because they're tree climbers. So today's apes certainly can. Whereas the human, we have a scapula, our bones in our back, and the scapula is structured flat in humans, and it becomes a platform against which we can't bend our arm back at the shoulder beyond a certain angle, whereas apes can go way back there. That's what I'm trying to say. But because of this feature, humans can throw, and we can throw with efficiency, and only humans can throw baseballs the way that we do, for example. And then, so what else? The spine, we have an S-shaped spine, whereas apes have a C-shaped spine. And so the C-shaped spine is rigid as well. And our S-shaped spine has lumbar vertebrae that swivel. And so our shoulders can turn while our hips stay stationary. But in apes, it's all locked as one unit to provide stable platform for tree climbing. So if their hips move, so are their shoulders are going to move at the same time because it's all rigid there. But whereas in humans, this S-shaped curve with the swivelly lumbar vertebrae, those combine to give us the ability to walk efficiently on two legs called bipedal locomotion. And we can run as well as a result on two legs. What else? So going down, we have the hips. In apes, the hip, the iliac bone is part of your hip. It's the part where if you put your thumbs on your sides of your hips and then feel right beneath your belt, you can feel that iliac flare, or the part of the hip. Now that's on your sides, and it even wraps around almost to the front on humans. But in all apes, that iliac it's like parallel with its back. In humans, it wraps around like a bowl, edges of a bowl, but in apes, it's flat against its back. And what that translates to is it wraps around in us so that we can swing our thigh or swing our legs back much farther, and that's part of what enables us bipedally as we do. But in apes, they can't. They're always bent at the waist because they can't swing their leg back nearly as far as can humans. And I would say very long finger bones in relation to the thumb bone in apes, very long finger bones in relation to the body in apes, whereas in humans, we have much shorter finger bone to body length, much shorter finger bone to thumb length. What else? The feet really are super distinctive, and anyone can know. A child can look at ape feet and notice that it's got this thumb for a big toe. The big toe sticks out in apes, and they use their feet for grasping tree branches. So that's really distinctive in all the apes that are alive today. Whereas in humans, we have this big toe that points forward, and that's what enables us to actually run long distances, which animals are not. No animal is as good at running long distances as a trained human is. So how about that? That's your survey of anatomical distinctives between apes and humans.
Okay.
Anatomy.
Yeah, I have some follow-up questions on that. I have, I remember, I think it was Dr. Jason Lau I heard talk about this. Like we can sit there and like if we hang out from the monkey bars, it would actually hurt our shoulders. Because our shoulders is not really designed to do that. Whereas they can actually hang in trees and branches and things like that. They obviously have the longer arms for that to swing branches too. And they're like you said, their feet are like got opposable toes, so they can grab hold of branches and stuff. Now there is a now I've heard that some evolutionists try to claim that the fossils are found with foramen magnum similar to ours, like Lucy or some other Australopithecine, or like other Australopithecine apparensis. How would you respond to that? I'm sure you're probably familiar with evolutionists saying that.
Yeah, sure. So again, if this is the skull, we can imagine my wrist is not part of this. Well, um, as I was mentioning before, the position of the foramen magnum at the bottom or back of the skull. In modern apes, it's more toward the back. In modern humans, it's right at the bottom. But in some Australopithecus, which is, I believe, an extinct ape, the position is somewhere in between modern apes and modern humans. But it's not the position that matters. There's lots of features that just don't matter because they don't distinguish between kinds. So it's not really helpful unless you're wanting to find features that help blur the lines between kinds. And I think that's what we have going on with some researchers, maybe. But what we do find in just measurement after measurement in the Australopithecus samples where we do have foramen magnum, we have the angle of it is distinct, and in fact, the angle of the foramen magnum aligns right up with that of apes, modern apes. Again, because that's not the position in the skull. It could be more toward the bottom, like in Australopithecus is. But the angle of it is just like that in chimps, for example. In fact, Australopithecus is very chimp-like in almost every way. Those long arms, long fingers, hands for feet, long toes, curved toes for branching, for grasping branches. And it's got that negative angle on the foramen magnum. So these are, so in other words, if I want to find a missing link between apes and humans, then I am happy to point out that the position of the foramen Australopithecines was intermediate between modern apes and modern man. But you can find a whole bunch of features that look intermediate to, but actually don't reflect any kind of evolutionary transition. They're not really intermediate. They're just unique parts of uniquely created creatures. And in this case, those creatures walked on all fours just as easily as modern chimpanzees do. They had the same, they're 3.5 feet tall, 500 cc brain size, very chimp-like in every way with those australopiths.
All right, awesome. Okay, how do differences in the human skull reflect our unique abilities, especially in speech and brain function?
Well, one obvious difference is that humans have this hyoid bone, which is right in the middle. It's floating. It's connected with cartilage, part of the voice box, and it's critical to the way we speak. And so, unfortunately, with fossils, it's hard. It's such a small bone that when the carcass rots, that little bone will float away, either during deposition or after deposition. And so, but some rare cases, you do find the hyoid bone. If you do, it's always with a human skeleton. So that's a feature that enabled to speak, and it's diagnostic, we could say, of humans.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. How does a worldview, what role does worldview play in how scientists interpret similarities between humans and apes?
Well, technically, worldview, I would say philosophers define worldview among there's just eight, there's I think 7 options, and it really revolves around: are we all alone? Is there a God? Is that God transcendent, or is he part of the universe? Um, and so let's say I have an atheistic worldview, which is really the secular worldview. And most people would not say, I'm an atheist, but they live atheistically because he's totally uninvolved. He was not the creator because nature made everything by natural processes. Evolution did it. And so in that worldview, which is an atheistic worldview, you don't have space for a creator. So therefore you define, and this becomes your filter on how you view the world. And you put on the atheistic secular glasses, and everything that comes through hits those lenses. And if it doesn't match what we accept and have chosen to accept, then it just bounces right off. Um, so really it does us good, doesn't it, to think about, okay, what do I believe and why do I believe it? Instead of just adopting uncritically whatever worldview is expressed in movies, by my parents, by my teachers, in my books, magazines, and whatever I'm looking at, and talking people I'm talking with. Should I just adopt that worldview without thinking about what I believe or why I believe it? And I would say it makes a big difference to actually think about, all right, is there a God? Could there be a God? And if there is he knowable? Like, what is he like? And once you're open to that, then if you just think that there's a possibility that there might be a God, guess what happens? We start to ease those secular glasses down to our nose. We look over the top of the lenses, and we start to see there's another world out here, and I wonder if the data of the world I live in fit better within this theistic rather than atheistic worldview. That's what happens to a lot of people. They do this, and I did it as well. And I went from thinking theistically to thinking theistically. And so what does that do? It changes everything, because you begin to see evidence that you were blinding yourself to. And the Bible says it this way very clearly in Romans chapter 1. It says that we suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So we actively push the truth down. The truth keeps trying to pop up, but we just keep suppressing it, not because it's not there, obviously, but because if it's true that there is a God and that he did make everything, then I'm actually accountable to him, and I may have to give an account one day. And in fact, we do. And I'd rather pretend like there's no judgment day coming at all. And so I'm just going to keep suppressing this truth. And we end up kind of going crazy with all the active suppression that we're doing. And we spend so much emotional and intellectual energy suppressing the truth in unrighteousness that it hinders us from enjoying life. And it certainly hinders us from enjoying new life in Christ, which Jesus offers. He says, just repent of your sins and I'll give you brand new life. And that life is everlasting, as we know from John 3:16. God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son so that whoever believes in him would not perish like what we deserve, but would have everlasting life. And so that's a completely different worldview, isn't it? Now we look at the world as, wow, we can marvel at what God made and we can marvel to him as the maker. Instead of just marveling at nature in general, we could say, wow, Lord, you did a good job making this, and that kind of thing. Um, so it changes the whole way we think, and it changes our whole attitude and approach all day long.
So once you stop thinking about, well, did God design this? Then of course you're thinking, oh, well, this must have happened by chance. But then when you start realizing God designed this, you start looking at it through the lens of common design, where God actually created everything. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, well said. Sure.
Awesome. All right, let's move on. I talked to you a little bit before we started the recording on synopomorphies and apomorphies. You said your knowledge on that was limited. So if you want to, instead of going through the specific questions I have, maybe you can go through with what you know within limits, obviously.
Okay, so synapomorphies and apomorphies, and these are terms, these are really evolutionary terms. So um, they kind of like assume that evolution is a fact in the very terms themselves. So I don't really use them because I have a different worldview, as you just said, and so but these terms are used in basically for the layperson, we would say building um, evolutionary trees, a tree or evolutionary tree diagrams. And so these tree diagrams are supposed to show um, branches. At the tips of the branches are the creatures that are alive today. And as you go back toward the trunk, you're going back in time. And the along the time that goes in these branches back toward the trunk, you're supposed to show and be thinking of ancestors that led to today's forms and kinds. And so anyway, the the exercise of building these trees is largely, in my experience, circular because it all depends on assuming that the set of creatures that you're looking at or the set of features for those creatures all had a common ancestor in the first place. And so from an evolutionist standpoint, it's really, boy, it borders on committing a logical fallacy, of just assuming the conclusion. We shouldn't, that's bad science. We shouldn't assume the conclusion. We should reach a conclusion by looking through data. But there's another problem because when we do these kinds of analyses and try to figure out what may have descended from what and which creature evolved into what creature, or however you want to phrase that, it turns out that there are certain features that have nothing to do with ancestor-descendant relationships, but they just happen to look similar because of common design, not common descent. So how do you factor that into the tree diagram building process? What if they were just commonly designed? And I think of course, the extinct ichthyosaur, which is a reptile, but it was shaped like a dolphin. So if you took all the bones of an ichthyosaur and some of the bones of a dolphin and compared them, you would see, you would see the streamlined body shape very well suited for swimming. And so did one evolve into the other, or the other evolve into one because they're shaped the same after all? And the answer is no. There's no evolutionary connection between the two at all. One one was designed to swim, and guess what? The other one was also designed to swim. every bone positioned and shaped so that the creature was completely streamlined right from the start, wherever we see it in the fossils, or in case of dolphins, we see them alive today, well crafted.
Awesome answer. Yes, I agree with you 100%. This is circular reasoning. This is actually a particular, I don't know if you call it a field of discipline or what, but I don't think I would call it field of discipline. It's more like a, I don't know how to explain it, but it's called cladistics. It's basically just where they just kind of assume common ancestry, and then they just kind of look for similarities that they think that they would have. In this case, in the case of synopomorphies, they're actually defining what it means to be ape, and then they look for like example, humans and apes have no tail, and so they would say, oh, well, see there, we have no tail, apes have no tail. So they look for these superficial similarities, and they don't realize that that could actually have a design feature. Actually, our tailbone has a design feature, doesn't it? It doesn't it like hold certain muscles that are necessary for reproduction or something like that?
Well, it's necessary for going number two, that's for sure.
So yeah, but it actually has a function to it, so it's not something that's and a lot of times, like you said, they're not looking at it from a design perspective, so they're looking at it from a, oh, how could this arise by chance perspective. All right,
Yeah, and I think there's
go ahead.
if I could add on to that, sorry, a tendency as
Okay.
well in cladistics to minimize distinguishing characteristics and to overemphasize non-distinguishing characteristics. So that's a problem too, and it's very subtle. It's very subtle um, in the mind of the worker. There's another aspect to this. You were struggling to find out what would you call it a discipline or not, right?
Right.
And I'll say uh, most papers in certain areas, papers on fossils, especially papers where they're trying to describe a newly found fossil. We've given it the name, brand new name, this and that, in honor of so and so and where it was found or whoever. And so we establish it as a new species and in new genera and all that. They always have to put a cladistic analysis in the paper. It's because it's like this, it's expected. And it's like if you're going to be published and if you want to be in the club, you have to do cladistic analysis and you have to play this game and you have to put something down there that shows what evolved into what. And it's like it's never ending, and it's they literally never come to an answer um, because it's almost totally subjective. It's so soaked with subjectivity that there's a new evolutionary tree with every single analysis done. Even on the same data sets, you can do a slightly different analysis and you get a different tree. And I think it's because it's not objective science. It's more of just an exercise that you have to do if you want to be in the club and be published and be thought of as an evolutionist like all the other cool people are.
Are you familiar with Dr. Gabriella Haynes from Answers in Genesis? She is
Yes.
very well versed in cladistics, and we had actually an interview on that. We actually have two interviews. One though was on the claim of bird evolution, and the second was on cladistics specifically. But she talked about cladistics also when we were talking about that on the so-called bird evolution, and in that video, she actually said she actually read a paper that said feathered dinosaur found, and then when you actually look at it and you find out that no, they didn't find feathers on the dinosaur, they found filaments, which is hairs. And but because they believe that filaments evolved into feathers. Now, I mean, I think there was a time when they thought that like the scales evolved into feathers. I don't think they say that anymore. They say that like the filaments evolved into feathers, and so they found a few filaments, and filaments are just hairs. And so they say, "Oh, see there, that's a feathered dinosaur," because they're redefining the word feather and filament because they assume that filament evolves eventually into feather, and so so it ends up getting redefined. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Gabrielle Haynes's works. I assume you are. But she talks about that. That I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, they redefine what those terms mean. All right.
They sure do, and I appreciate her work, and I'd like for you to send me those interviews with her. That'd be great.
Okay, awesome. I will. All right. Next question. In what ways, this is something similar, but in what ways might functional adaptation, we talked about adaptation earlier, functional adaptation or design similarities be misinterpreted as evidence for common ancestry? Like maybe they see something that they think, oh, see there, that's a shared characteristics, and it's like, no, that's design. Similar, creatures, similar organisms might need similar, needs or that sort of thing, functionally.
Yeah, so I mean, sure, the characteristic is shared, but the question is, how did how did that same characteristic get into two different, otherwise different creatures? And the evolutionist answer is, well, it either inherited that characteristic from an ancestor of both of those creatures, or that characteristic evolved independently, at some time in the past. And so those are the answers that they give. There's problems with those answers, though. The first problem with either answer is that it simply assumes evolution is true. It's not showing, it's not proving the case. It's making the conclusion before analyzing the data. And what data are we overlooking when we assume that? You know, assume that the evolution is the answer. Well, we're overlooking the data. Number one, we don't see this happening today. We don't see any examples of these body characteristics morphing over many generations. And we've studied fruit flies, we've studied bacteria, we've studied creatures over many generations. And they of course adapt within limits, but they still retain fidelity to their originally created kind, whether it's Escherichia coli or um, we have roundworms, generations and generations of roundworms. And they're still roundworms. They're still E. coli, and uh, so to get these similar features, we should see, science should be able to show us examples of it happening today, especially in these studies where they are looking for and trying to force these creatures to produce different basic design features. Anyway, it's not happening today. That should be a big red flag, a warning flag at least, to say, well, if it's not happening today, then how are we sure that it happened in the past? How are we sure at all that it happened in the past? And where do we look for evidence that it may have happened in the past? Well, the only place to look for that is in fossils. And what do we find in fossils? We find the same thing as we find in living creatures. We do not find what we'd expect to find if evolution is really happened in the past over the eons that have been assigned to these fossils and rock layers. What should we expect if evolution is the way to go? We'd expect most fossils to show transitional features where it's not yet, you've got feet that are not yet wings. You've got, you've got a three-chambered heart that's got a fourth chamber. Of course, hearts don't fossilize, but you see what I'm saying? You should see transitional features, but we don't. We see fully formed features in every case.
Yeah.
Now, there's of course debatable ones where this looks transitional to me, but it turns out that with every of a transitional feature in a fossil creature, another evolutionist says, no, that's not transitional at all.
The funny thing is when
And so
Clark,
every single one is debated.
yeah, funny thing is when Clark found Littlefoot, He said that, I mean, there was no doubt that it had, he said the feet was similar to an ape. He said that, I think he said something about like he thought the heel was transitional or something like that. And now it's the opposite. They said, all the heel's ape and the toes transitional. It's like no, it might not be as opposable to as a modern ape, but it's still because even semi-opposable is still opposable. It's not the same as an inline big toe. I mean, how would that thing even walk if it had an inline big toe and there's no other component that's fixed for bipedal walking? So it just has one foot that just happens to be transitional. I mean, that thing's gonna
right?
be
And
looking.
the middle,
Go ahead. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's a good point, and it's another that's a good example of the debate.
Right, right. Um, and the funny thing is, I actually had an evolutionist recently. This is recently in the comment section tell me that that because I was talking about the differences between humans and apes, and this was after my Dr. Bergman interview where we talked about the same subject on differences between humans and apes, and he said that oh well that's interpreted. Now the real evidence is in the fossils, where he said there would be overwhelming evidence, and I said nothing. You talk about interpretation, nothing screams interpretation like fossils. That is the most interpreted because they have to interpret it, they reconstruct it. Um,
And and we can produce quotes from evolutionists, from evolutionists' mouths themselves, where they admit, and we use these quotes in our presentations, not because we're trying to, to cherry pick, but we're trying to reveal to regular people in our audiences what these scientists are saying to themselves in these journals that are behind paywalls. And what are they saying to themselves? Things like, we know that the icon of apes to man, you know, this march of progress icon, we know that it is a joke, but why do we cling to it? Those kinds of quotes. We know this doesn't work. The evidence doesn't show this ape to man ascension at all. You've got human parts down below, and you've got ape parts up in the upper layers, and it's just a jumbled mess of created kinds that are got buried low or got buried high, and that's what the data really show.
in what ways has the artistic license in Reconstruction shaped public belief in human evolution? Um, do you see this as kind of like misleading a lot of times in the way it's portrayed? Because I actually watched a debate. It was between Dr. Bergman and another. I don't know if you were familiar with a YouTube channel called Guts a Gibbon. The person on there is someone I know. It's Erica, and she sat there and did a debate with Dr. Bergman, where she would sit there and go over human and ape and claim that the Australopithecines were bipedal and uh, and one of the things I found was that it was extremely misleading to someone, and it's one of the reasons why I did a debate review on it because it's extremely misleading to somebody that may never have actually studied the fossils and may not realize that this is highly interpreted. Look at the poor conditions these fossils are found in. A lot of the evidence is actually limited. We don't find all of the fossils. To find a even nearly complete fossil preserve is hard to do. I mean, if a paleoanthropologist finds a nearly complete fossil, they're dancing in the street because that's not a normal everyday thing. Because usually we're finding a tooth or a skull or something like that. So you know what I'm saying? But this can get really misleading to the general public when they hear evolutionists because you got evolutionists like Erica that will come off really super competent in those interpretations and say them like they're absolute fact, like they're just they know for a fact that this is the case. And what would you say on that? I realize that one of the reasons why we do what we do is to try to educate people on these matters. But do you see that this is influential to the general public, especially when people have not actually studied the matter or researched it?
Well, as far as I'm not familiar with that YouTuber, um, so
That's okay.
but I've been in conversations with evolutionists about this, and it's usually not very productive, honestly, because as soon as we get into the weeds, it's just they have, like I said, the secular glasses on, and they're just not really willing to consider the possibility that what they've been taught in their textbooks by their professor, and shown in black and white in their minds, that would have been subject to fudging of any kind, and so I, and so it does behoove us who object to human evolution to come up with some pretty pointed and clear questions to ask in those conversations. One question along those lines that I would ask is, um, in in looking at the Lucy reconstruction at the Denver Museum, um, the thing has human feet, fully human feet in every way, and human hands, human hip structure, human knees pointed forward instead of out like an ape, toes pointed forward, um, like human instead of an ape. Okay, all those human-like features from the neck down. Now, that was reconstruction based on what? Like who supplied the modeler with those features to make Lucy look like a walking ape? Because when I compare that with the Smithsonian one that's more recent, the model of Lucy in the Smithsonian, it looks exactly like a chimp. I mean, bent hip, bent knees, long arms, knuckle walking. And so who's right? So if someone says it's a fact, then I would say, well, why is it shown this way in one museum, but the more recent model in the Smithsonian is shown a completely different anatomy? Like, can you explain that to me? And just put it on that person, and maybe they have an explanation, which is fine. But one explanation that I think helps and may fit the data, or may fit the idea that we do see change in the way that these things are represented over time in different museums. What does it? Well, what accounts for that change is like what you said. They're the experts hold these fossils close to them, and they only reveal the bits that they want you to see, and the angles they want you to notice, and the reconstructions that imagination adds to. And the second way that the portrayals that we see these creatures online or in movies or in museums is really impactful to us is when they put human eyes into ape skulls in ape bodies. And that is just egregious. It's egregious. It's irresponsible because it puts a soul into an animal, because human eyes are unique. Um, and by the way, eyeballs don't fossilize anyways. So human eyes are unique in that we have the sclera, the whites of our eyes, that enables us to communicate with just the movement of our eyes. Animals don't communicate that way. Um, they have sclera, of course, but they don't use it in face-to-face communication like humans do. So to put human eyes into, and it's in all kinds of museums all over the place, and it looks creepy, and it makes you think, well, maybe these creatures really did exist, and we see. In fact, I grew up watching movies that showed that, and that's what convinced me of evolution. Human evolution was the movie industry, really. And so, yeah, this kind of portrayal and imagination is really what fuels the whole industry of human evolution, in my view.
Right. I was indoctrinated in the public school system when I believed in evolution before I became a Christian. Um, but yeah, the whites of the eyes that humans have, that's extremely unique property there. The apes don't have that. That's another difference between humans and apes, and all primates actually. All primates don't have that whites of their eyes. Isn't that right?
Well, no, some have some sclera visible at some angles. If let's say if they open their eyes real big, you can see some of the sclera. And some have more sclera and some have less. So it's not all, but none of them use the sclera to communicate the way we do, is how I would put that. Yeah.
Okay. How about the facial prognathism and nasal aperture shape in distinguishing humans from apes? This area. Is that
Yeah.
it's very distinguishing characteristic, and you do think that that's, I guess, within apes, would that be a design feature? Because obviously that's very different from what we have.
I think there's debate on that. I'm not prepared right now to say that prognathism in general is a distinguishing feature because there are people, humans today, and you'd say they're fully human person, right, who have prognathism, and so their jaw is forward, their mandible, um, and maxilla both, are far ahead of the nose and everything. Of course, apes, it's definitely more prominent across the board, but there are some humans that have we have so much variation in human shape, more than animals. Our heads can be wide, narrow, tall. Our eyes can be wide set, inset. We can have big noses, little noses. There's more variation in human face shape than in animals. I think God made it that way. But what that does is it makes it difficult to say that, a certain face shape or feature is definitely all. So some humans are more prognathic and have that pronounced, that, but all apes do, between humans and apes. Um, but there's one facial feature that does distinguish between humans and apes, and it's a nasal bone. Humans have the nasal bone. You can touch it right here at the bridge of your nose. It's what your glasses rest on. Apes do not have that bone that sticks out from the front of your skull. They just have a flat nose there. So it's a different nose structure for the apes. I would say that much.
Most of according to evolutionists, they think that most of our DNA is junk DNA. Now, there was a project a while back called the ENCODE project, stands for like Encyclopedia um, of DNA elements. Um, in which case they found that at least 80% of our DNA is functional, and even they even warn against people thinking that just because we don't know a function to a particular a genetic function does not mean it does not have one. Would you say that this challenges the whole human ape similarity argument? It shows that most of our, or at least on the claim of human evolution, would you say that this actually challenged that idea? Because I think that, if I'm not mistaken, was junk DNA kind of like a prediction from evolutionary theory that they predicted that most of our DNA would not be functionally relevant, or at least for the most part?
Well, I'm not aware that it was a prediction, but it was certainly highly celebrated when I was in graduate school earning a master's degree in biochemistry. We were taught in nucleic acids analyses. Now, this is before the human genome was fully sequenced, but they had enough sequence to do analyses on it, and they found that it's some of these reports in the late 1990s that yeah, there's really no genes here. There's no genes, protein coding genes. And they had estimates that the human genome, once it was going to be completed, was probably going to show somewhere around less than 4% of the genome was protein coding genes. That means that 96% plus is useless. And then they just took that and ran with it. I couldn't believe it. Just went right into the textbooks in 2000 when I was teaching biology at universities, and it's no sense. I mean, because it's one thing to have the instruction codes to make the the 2x4s and the nails and the shingles, right? But all you have is a pile of 2x4s, shingles, and nails. You don't have a house. it's a construction sequence. Like, where do you put each 2x4? Where do you put each nail? Where do you put each shingle? And when do you put it on there in sequence? So all these regulatory pieces of information, that's what the 94% codes for. And so you're right, the ENCODE project, and they started producing their first results. By the way, massive consortium, hundreds of scientists, international project, and they're doing sequencing, and they're also doing um, they're they're doing using techniques that show when DNA is accessed in the cell within this tissue versus that tissue, within this stage of development versus that stage of development. And what they're finding is that even if it's not accessed, if this section of DNA isn't accessed in one stage of development, it's probably accessed in another stage. If it's not accessed in one tissue type, it is accessed in another tissue type. And so that's what and they keep putting out papers regularly because they keep finding more and more functions for what was once celebrated as a whole pile of junk DNA. And the reason the evolutionary community loved the idea of junk was because that gives you billions of base pairs for nature to tinker with. So you can have mutations galore, and you could have the chance, maybe hopeful, that natural selection can pull out of the junk pile of DNA and create a new feature with it. Well, it turns out that there's almost no junk DNA, and there may be none at all, based on the continuous supply of information from the ENCODE and other projects that are finding useful functionality for the vast majority, over 90% so far, of DNA.
There's actually a recent paper that came out on human and chimp, or basically on the differences actually between the fully sequenced ape genomes now and the fully sequenced human genome, in which they found like 12.5% to 26 or 27.3% differences between sixth grade apes and human. And so that's pretty cool. So basically, with between chimps and humans is about a 15% difference. So you factor that in to the overall percent similarity, it comes around 85%. And I know that a colleague of yours, Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins, over there at Institute for Creation Research, has done some significant research on that. And and there was also an evolutionary geneticist that also discussed that, Dr. Richard Buggs. Are you familiar with Dr. Richard Buggs?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he also came up with an 85% similarity. And now this happened. So it's like, okay, so now the evolutionists are trying to say, and this is why I connected back to this question, because now they're trying to say that, well, yes, but that 15% is a non-protein coding region. And the ENCODE project actually found out that the non-coding protein coding region was responsible for gene regulation and a whole bunch of stuff. They're just completely functional. And so this idea that somehow that this 15% is either non-functional or functionally irrelevant. Like, oh yeah, there's 15%, but we don't have to worry about that 15% because it's found in the non-protein coding regions. And so, but anyway, I thought that was interesting because are you how familiar are you with that study? Because I know that this study was published this year, and I know it's been all over the internet. So I'm sure you probably know something about it.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that one up. Yeah. So about a decade ago, like you said, my colleague, Dr. Jeff Tompkins here at the Institute, was doing a DNA sequence comparison between chimps and humans to explore the veracity or truthfulness of the really common claim. It became it became like a fact, but it turns out it's fake news that humans and chimps share 98% genetic similarity. It was in all the museums, it's in all the, you know, street level conversations. It's in the textbooks. 98% similarity, which means that chimps and humans share common ancestry. It fits the model that we share common ancestry and that we both evolved from the same common ancestor. So we explored that, and he actually was the first to do sequence comparison with just the raw data. And what he found was something close to 85%. Now that's maximum similarity because you have to chop off, exclude sequence that's not even comparable because it's just so completely different. So the maximum similarity would be 85%. So he published those in peer-reviewed science journals, creation-based science journals that evolutionists don't even spend the time of day on. Well, now here is a decade later, and the paper you're referencing came out in Nature, the world's top journal. And in the supplementary information, they almost begrudgingly said, "Yeah, admitted it's 85% similar, which means 15% difference, not 1 or 2% difference." So, when that came out, what did we think? Well, good job, Dr. Tompkins. You did your analysis correctly. It vindicates his work from a decade ago. And so we really celebrate the quality work that he has done as a geneticist here at the Institute. And I appreciate what you're doing as well, because we need to get the word out. These are fake fact. This is fake news that we have junk DNA. No, we don't. The data have disproven that. It's fake news that we're genetically identical almost. Total fake news. The data have now that we've actually investigated it, instead of assuming these things, we've found that the data don't back that up at all, and that it fits. It actually fits what we'd expect based on humans being created separately from apes as well.
All right. As a final question, I just want you to give me your final thoughts, summarize all of this, and tell me what you think on human-ape differences, claims of common design. Just kind of give a brief closing there. What is your, after studying all of this, what is your take on this?
I spoke once with a Christian who came to Christ, I guess late in life, and someone shared the gospel with him that, even though we're sinners, Jesus stands ready to save us, rescue us from our sins. All we have to do is repent of sins and trust in him, and we could be born again. And he realized he is a sinner, and he agreed with that message. I am the problem. Like, the problem is within me. And I need to be rescued from this. And I recognize that I am making wrong choices, and I wreck other people's lives with these wrong choices, all that kind of thing. In other words, there's a reality of morality. Like, there's right and wrong. And how do we know this? And how did he discover this? Because when people stole his stuff, he got upset about it. Well, why would he get upset if there's no such thing as right or wrong? When people slapped him in the face, he got angry. Well, why would he feel anything if there's no such thing as right? When he got cut off in traffic, he got angry. What right is he defending? Who gave him the knowledge that he has the right to have the place in line or anything like that? So the reality of morality really got him. And he said, "You know what? I play a role in this too. I do wrong things, and that's evil. And so I need a savior." So he came to know the Lord. He trusted Christ, born again. Then he went back and said, "Okay, let me read this Bible that I just believe the Jesus parts, but do I believe the Genesis parts?" And he started reading Genesis. And he gets to this part where God created us, and we came from Adam and Eve instead of from apes. Like, I don't know if I can buy this. But then he thought about it, and he thought about the history of his life growing up, and he thought, what was I think? I mean, it was like in one moment he just reviewed all that he had been taught, and he thought, and he's telling me this story, and I thought, I'm glad to hear someone admit it. He thought that this whole idea that we evolved from apes doesn't match what we actually see. It doesn't explain, especially the immaterial. We've been talking about the material differences, the differences in anatomy, behavior is another one, but but the immaterial differences he knew. He said, you know what? The whole time I said I believed that we evolved from apes, I actually knew, I actually knew that I have imagination. I can speak, you know, I can learn things. I can write books. Uh, uh, I can do wrong. I can do right. And none of that fits within an evolutionary worldview. And he rejected all of the, all the evolutionary baggage just in like one afternoon. And when he thought back on it and realized, you know what was I thinking? He realized that he was just wanting to fit in. And so I would urge your listeners to think along those lines. And why? What do you believe, and why do you believe it? Is it to be honest with yourself? Is it because you're suppressing the truth in unrighteousness because you don't want to face God? Well, there's good news for that, because if you do face God now and admit, that you're a sinner, like so many of us have done, and need a savior, bam, you can trust Christ and be born again and have everlasting life, like now. Um, but that's an option that I think this kind of study leads us to, and also an objective. I'd say this: an objective look at the data really do match what we see in the Bible and what God wrote. I think God got it right, and I got it wrong back when I believed in human evolution. Um, and I think God got it right when He said that God made Adam and Eve, and that we basically descended from them, from Noah later on as well. I think there's genetic data to back that up. Anyway, but you have to want to learn that side of the story. So I urge you to try to learn that side of the story. Go to icr.org and read all of our tens of thousands of articles that show science that supports Scripture.
Awesome. Thank you. Another one I would point to is consciousness. Try to get evolutionists try to explain how consciousness came about. But yeah, there obviously we didn't get into all the meta stuff that would qualify us as human. I think we mostly focus on the physiological differences, but you're right. There are stuff that goes beyond the physical that cannot be explained by claims of human evolution. But I do appreciate you for your time. Thank you for taking this time. I'm glad that you were on there. I hope maybe we can you can be on there again at some point. So thank you again, Dr. Thomas. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope you continue doing the work that you're doing, because I think that you're all doing a great job at Institute for Creation Research. I know I benefited from y'all's work. I've benefited from Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins. I got some of his books and that sort of thing. So I'm glad y'all doing well. I think that y'all doing a great job there. And I appreciate it.
Well,
I know that, oh, go ahead.
I appreciate the kind words, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate what you do as well, and I'd be happy to see you again as well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Maybe we can do this again another time. But all right. Thank you again for joining us on there, and I appreciate it. And I will see you next time. Thank you, Dr. Tom. And I will send you those the links to those two videos as well with Dr. Gabriella Haynes. All right. God
Thank you
bless.
very much for having me on, Brian. You
All right.
too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Apologetics 101. I really appreciate it. And this was the last episode of the Are We Apes series. A series that I am so proud of. I am really happy for. I was very satisfied with the results of the series and all the interactions and the engagements. It was a really good series. I hope I do more on the so-called human evolution thing, responding to it, and be able to respond to it in the future. I'm kind of thinking about doing something on fossils eventually, just kind of zeroing in on that, responding to some of the arguments there, getting really specific in terms of the fossil evidence. and that might interest a lot of people and that sort of thing. So tell me what you think in the comment section. I really appreciate it. I think that both Dr. Bergman and Dr. Thomas did a phenomenal job on discussing the anatomical differences between humans and apes, and I'm glad that all the people there, all the experts that have contributed to my series here, Dr. Georgia Purdom, for example, I think that they did a wonderful job in discussing these topic matters. I think Donnie Budinsky's been on this series, Matt Naylor, also from Standing for Truth Ministries, and they've all contributed to the Are We Apes series, and I think it has been a blast doing this, and I loved it, every minute of it. But don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Give the video a thumbs up, and we got more ahead. I did an interview not too long ago with Dr. Carl Werner, like a few days ago, and I need to get to editing that, and then I'll upload that probably early September, because I just really want to focus on trying to end my RE Ape series this month, and then I'll get the Carl Werner one up. That one is going to be us responding to the so-called transitional fossils. And we're trying. I'm trying to see if we can get a part two of that, because we kind of had to cut it short on a lot of the questions that I would like to have answered. Because we also did a 2 hour. He also did a 2 hour presentation, and so we went quite a bit of time there, and so hopefully he'll be willing to come back for a part two, and we'll have a kind of a part two of that discussion as well, and get more into the weeds of some of that. And it's going to be strictly Q&A and that sort of thing. So hopefully that will happen whenever Dr. Carl Werner can get back to me, and depending on what his earliest convenience is. And I can't wait, because in the month of September, I'm going to kind of dive a little bit more into my mini series that I have out now on the Tompkins Controversy Revisited. I really enjoyed the fact that there's a new study out now. Me and Dr. Brian Thomas talked about it a little bit. Me and Dr. Carl Werner, when you'll see that video, we talked a little bit about that study. So it's going to be awesome to actually continue the mini-series in the month of September. All right. Thank you again for watching. I appreciate it. Thank God you are here. I am so happy. I am literally 2 subscribers away from 300. So get this word out. I want to be able to get as many eyes on these videos as possible. So please share the word. Put this on your community page, social media, spread the word on Facebook. Just kind of let people know that there is a channel that is responding to these arguments and going into the weeds and interviewing experts and having a conversation with these guys, and be able to sit there and set the record straight, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of bad arguments that are floating around by the evolutionist community. There's, believe it or not, there's still people that throw out outdated concepts like junk DNA and stuff like that. And I'm glad that we continue to spread the truth, and the truth of God's word, of course, and also the truth of the gospel, definitely, but also be able to defend the faith of Christianity with absolute confidence that we believe the truth, and that critics, they've been misled, and we need to get the word out to more people. All right, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.